Well, joining us from Abuja is lawyer and policy analyst Isaac Anumudu, and here in Lagos is another lawyer, Bashiru Ramoni. Many thanks for joining us, learned men.
Thank you very much.
I will begin with you in the studio. Senate President Bukola Saraki is now a free man. Now, this has been described as a political trial that has resulted in a political judgment. What's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is very, very simple. First, I need to make this caveat that presently no one has ever seen the certified true copy of the judgment or the ruling, so to speak, and so it would be very hasty to either condemn or appreciate the ruling. But as it were, going by the provision of the Constitution, every accused person is presumed to be innocent until it is proved guilty. But now, the tribunal had spoken and said, this man has no case to answer. So, well, until we see the content of the ruling, and you know, in law, there's what we call obiter dictum and the ratio decidendi. That is, the rationale of the court. Yes, the obiter dictum simply means comment by the side, and the rationale behind the decision made. So for us to comment really on this ruling, we have to see the rationale behind the conclusion.
All right, let me speak with Barrister Isaac Anumudu. How is it that in spite of 48 exhibits, the prosecution failed to link Senate President Bukola Saraki to the charges?
Thank you very much.
Did you hear
see, in law, we commonly say that you cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stand. I am not among those lawyers who are shocked and surprised at the outcome of this Saraki trial. In fact, I am among those who sincerely believe from the onset that this trial should never have been at all. It's unfortunate that the trial ever was. It's also unfortunate that huge taxpayers' money was spent on this legal jamboree, I will call it. Because from the onset, those of us who have been keenly following political cum legal developments in this country know that this trial was purely political ab initio. This is the same Saraki that was governor of a state for 8 years. This is the same Saraki that was in the Senate for 8 years. And we didn't hear any of this. All of a sudden, the moment Saraki emerged Senate president against the wishes of some powers that be, he had to be arraigned. He and the deputy Senate president were arraigned for forging Senate rules that they met in the Senate. Something that is purely the job of the bureaucracy in the Senate. But these principal officers that emerged against the wishes of some powers that be became victims of having to forge the rules by which they were inaugurated. Common sense tells you those rules were in existence before the House was inaugurated this time around. That trial was aborted halfway and they were discharged, showing that there was no merit in it ipso facto. Now, this same thing has now happened, showing that all of these were from the onset trumped-up charges. So there are very serious issues that have arisen here. Can we, a country in economic recession, a country in a virtual state of emergency on all fundamental areas of national development, be engaging in this kind of humongous distraction between critical arms of governance like the legislature and the executive in the form of trying someone in what apparently is a political witch hunt? We must learn to call a spade in this country.
Barrister, you say yes, this trial should never have been. But you do recall the prosecution brought new charges against Saraki, and the charges rose from the previous 13 to 18. Was this judgment a case of ineptitude on the part of the prosecutors, or were they just bogus charges?
Like I told you from the onset, you can't put something on nothing and expect it to stand. There was really no merit in the allegations and the trials from the onset. What we saw was an ingenious attempt by very hard-working prosecutors that were put in very difficult circumstances to try to make out something out of nothing. But you see, the way democracy is, if you have a right to prosecute, the defense has a right to defend. And our colleagues from the defense also did their job to show the paucity of the allegations and charges against Senator Bukola Saraki. And that's what has led to the discharge. So the lesson, what I'm concerned about is not even the legalese, simplicity, but the fundamental cost to the nation, to the economy. We should be a nation that are direct, that are straightforward in everything we do, so that when we say this has happened, it has not truly happened. Because these kind of things are the things some of us have been saying are the wrong steps being taken in the so-called anti-corruption fight.
And I have in the studio with me Barrister Bashiru Ramoni from Lagos. He's in the studio. And via Skype in Abuja, Barrister Isaac Anumudu. I was speaking with him earlier, and before we went on the break, he said that this was just an ingenious attempt at making something out of nothing. What are your thoughts? React to that.
Well, it appears that I'm having a different view.
Indeed.
Because the law is there for the EFCC or any prosecutorial authority to enforce. And where they believe that they have the evidence to prosecute anybody, I say, they can do so. Because looking at the provision of the Constitution, particularly Section 1, subsection 2 of the Constitution, it says, this country shall be governed in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, and that the provision of that same Constitution is binding on every person and authority. In the circumstance of this case, the Senate President is a person.
Exactly.
Meaning that he is bound by the provision of the Constitution. The prosecutorial authority, which is the EFCC, is also bound by the provision of the same Constitution. And when we look at the 5th schedule of the Constitution, particularly paragraph 4 to 11, it criminalizes certain conducts by public officers. So if the EFCC or the Code of Conduct Bureau believes that a public officer has violated the provision of the Constitution, the law is clear. You can approach the court to do so.
Being that he has been discharged and acquitted now, what are the implications of this tribunal judgment on the war on corruption?
Well, I have to look at it in two different perspectives. As a layman, a commoner, just Nigerians, simply yes, ordinary Nigerians, what the law regards as a reasonable man in Nigeria, what will be the implication for them? Then the implication will be that, oh, when will the Nigeria government get it right to bring to book people allegedly presumed to be corrupt? Okay, that is what ordinary man would think of. But to a professional, a lawyer, the implication is different, because a lawyer understands the principles of law, it understands the ratio behind the conclusion of the court, he understands the judicial authorities relied upon. And so for a lawyer or an expert, the educated elite, they are going to have it, there's going to be a different view entirely. Don't forget, if we look at the application brought before the court, before this ruling eventually was delivered, it was an application for no case submission. The question is, what does this mean? So for us, we believe that looking at the provision of Section 302 and 303 of Administration of Justice Criminal Act of 2015, 302 provides that a court, in the circumstance of the tribunal, can raise it on its own that, oh, having looked at the prosecution's case, I do not believe that this accused person or this defendant should answer any charges. The court can do that. However, by section 303, the defendant himself can say, court, take a look at these entire charges against me and look at the evidence again. Is there anything linking me with these charges? If the answer is no, that person will be discharged, because it means that there is no need for him to even go through the whole of defense.
Well, we seem to have conflicting ideas here. Barrister Anumudu, can Nigerians still have faith in the EFCC to bring corrupt government officials to justice?
To answer you straight away, Nigerians should have faith in the EFCC as an institution, because we should be about building institutions in this country. That's what some of us have been advocating in recent times. However, we have also pointed out very clearly that the EFCC must up its game. If you recall, there was a time recently EFCC was busy recovering monies everywhere. Recovering monies at the airports, recovering monies at Balogun Market, recovering monies at Bureau de Change, recovering monies in flats in Ikoyi, and all of that. This came after there were several criticisms that the EFCC chairman, Magu, should go, having not been confirmed by the Senate. And we began to see recoveries as if they were desperate attempts by the EFCC to give the impression that it is working. Some of us who are very vigilant in national matters like this quickly raised the alarm and said, no, that's not how to fight corruption. You can't tell us you recovered foreign currency in Bureau de Change when that is the normal business of Bureau de Change. You can't tell us you found money in Balogun Market when money is what is used in Balogun Market. Yeah. You can't tell us you found money in the airport when you couldn't find the person who left the money in the airport. Up to today, the COIF monies, we have not found who actually owes that money, and so on. So we must be objective. We must be serious about fighting corruption because of the damage corruption has done to the economy and the society. And if we must fight corruption, we must actually go after persons who are actually corrupt, not perceived political opponents. Because when you do that, the layman, the ordinary reasonable man on the street, begins to lose confidence in the anti-corruption war. He takes it as if there is a vendetta war at stake. He takes it as if there is persecution instead of prosecution. In the process, they will not buy in holistically into that war, and they will not give their best support, without which that war cannot be won. You don't win any war just because you have the soldiers, the bullets, the ammunition. No. The Northeast experience has taught us a lesson. The soldiers had to bring in the JTF and the local vigilante before they could win the war against Boko Haram. So if you want to win the war against corruption, you must buy in the entire Nigerians. Everybody must support you in that fight. And the only way Nigerians can support you, because Nigerians have become very intelligent. Nigerians have become very reasonable. They have become very observant and very interested in the governance of their country. The only way they can support you is if they see that you are fighting the war holistically, artistically, putting all the cards on the table and applying same rules for everybody. Then they will know you're sincere and they will back that war. That's the only way the war will succeed. And another lesson that this trial has brought out now is what I have been calling for consistently. And the National Assembly should pay attention. Now that we are dealing with constitutional amendment, the section 308 of the Constitution should be amended urgently.
Barrister Isaac Anumudu, lawyer and policy analyst, I'd like to thank you for joining us in TVC News Hour. And finally, Bashiru Ramoni, do you think this judgment can be appealed? Just very quickly.
Well, looking at the provision of the Constitution again, specifically that is part, the 5th schedule, it can be appealed to the Court of Appeal, and even from Court of Appeal to Supreme Court.
Bashiru Ramoni, many thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure.